All right, so in terms of today's material, we're going to add a little bit of some vocabulary. And you know, vocabulary means that's something that we are going to be grading on. That is something that is in your self-check document, so you can double check against that. And the thing we're going to be talking about is building in parts. And in terms of building in parts, a great mantra for you to adopt is build it like it's built. So what I'd like you to do is when you're building objects, look at these objects closely, study and try to understand them, because that will help you actually build it faster and better. And what I want you to do is imagine if I had to rebuild this object just like the real one, how would I have to do it? So the number of parts it would take to rebuild it, that's how many parts you should have when you rebuild it as well. So for example, if you take a look, objects in the real world are made of many parts. So what we want to make sure is that when we build the things that we build, they're made of parts also. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well then how do I figure out how many parts to make something out of? Because, you know, it could be arbitrary, you know, how do I determine that? And we have some guidelines for you. There's 3 of them that will help you kind of work out, how do I decide how many pieces to make something out of? Oh, yes, you should be seeing my screen. Let me just see. There's my screen. How about now? You guys seeing any stuff? We got a little bit of image moving there. Oh, there we go. All right, let me play my little airplane video for you again, because this is cute. Again, things in the real world are made of many pieces, so we want to make sure that the stuff we build is made of many pieces. All righty. And let me turn my camera off. Is that better? Yay! Awesome sauce. Terrific. So let's move into how do I determine the different pieces that I need to make my objects out of. So in terms of determining the way to figure out, well, how many pieces do I need to make this thing out of? Well, first we're going to look for materials. Materials are an excellent means of determining how many different pieces something should be made of. So for example, if you take a look at this fast food dinette set here, you can see that there's a couple of different materials for these objects. Who could name a material that they see or think they see there? Anybody want to share? Metal, absolutely. There's a metal. If you take a look at this structure here, that's kind of the spine or the backbone of the whole object, there's a lot of metal in there, so that's one piece. And yes, there's some wood or, you know, wood-ish material. Yes, laminate, absolutely, in here. And that's what's going to conform or create this shape here. And that gives us another material. And yes, absolutely, there's some rubbery sort of protective edges here so that we don't hurt each other. Absolutely. Oh, yes, and those little rubber protector things that go on the bottom of the little metal feet at the base of this thing, also another material. So if I look at this thing, I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 materials at a minimum. And screws, absolutely. Something's got to hold this thing together. Again, that concept of build it like it's built. So I'm already starting to see how many pieces it's going to take. All right, so there's a good idea. First thing we look for is materials. Look for the materials, and that will help you understand how many pieces to make something out of. Another terrific guide, again, is take a look at how the pieces come together. So if you look at the object, you're like, okay, in order to build the back of this chair, I've got one piece here, one piece here, one piece here, one piece here, and one piece here. And these are all kind of stuck together, you know, using doweling and glue or what have you. So if this piece is made of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, the model I build should also, that part should be made of 5 pieces. So we want to make sure that each piece is its own separate entity, just like it is on the real chair. Just like in our previous slide, when we take a look at this dinette set, this would be a piece, this would be a piece, this would be a piece, this metal would be a piece, those little feet would be a piece. So each one of those pieces, because that's the way the real one is built, that's the way yours should be built as well. And that's for a multitude of reasons. Not only do we want it to be accurate in terms of its assembly, but something else to think about is when it comes to the process of texturing and surfacing and all that type of thing, and making sure that all the materials are behaving as they should with regard to light, they're going to have to be made of separate pieces because that really makes that whole process much easier. So that separation by material and that separation by pieces is definitely very helpful. And the last thing that we use as a guide is parts that move. So when you're looking at the object and you're like, "Gee, man, how do I figure out how many different pieces this thing is made of?" Another great way to do it is go, okay, look, there are parts that move on here. So for example, if you look at this cylinder here, this is what holds all of the darts. You know, there's a Nerf dart in each one of those chambers. So because this rotates, that's going to have to be a separate piece. This trigger, right, this is the release. This depresses. So that's going to definitely be a separate piece. This cocking mechanism, this is what loads the spring. So clearly, in order for that to move, that's going to have to be a separate piece. So again, things that move is another great guideline. So when you're trying to figure it out, we start with different materials. If it's a different material, it's a different piece. Then we go to how are pieces actually attaching to each other on the object? And if they are attaching to each other, then those need to be separate pieces. And then lastly, moving parts. So if it's got a moving part, then that's something that is going to have to be a separate piece. And as if all that information was not enough for you, as Brian mentioned, there's a document that you guys downloaded called the 3DF Modeling Parts Guideline document. And it basically lists every object you have to build for this class and how many pieces, more or less, than it should be when you build it. So if you're like, you know what, I still have no idea, take a look at that document and just take a look and see. And, well, you know what, the document says 4, mine is 3. That's probably pretty good. Okay, if the document says 7 and yours is 1 or 2, okay, you're missing some stuff. So use that document, the Modeling Parts Guideline, to help you out with seeing how many different pieces, if there's any question as to how many of them it should be. All right, so building in parts, are there any questions on that, or are we pretty solid? Okay, well, as long as Elizabeth gets it, we're moving on. Okay, there goes everybody. All right. So, again, it's really, there's a lot of common sense in it, but the key is thinking before you move forward. It's kind of like a look before you leap thing. When you're modeling, I take time before I model anything, and I just study the image for a little while and try to figure out, how does this thing work? How did they put it together? If I had to make it, how could I make it? How are these parts moving? And to be honest with you, as I'm looking at the object, I'm starting to see the edge flow that it would take to build that object. I'm kind of imagining it in wireframe already. And that really helps a lot because, as I've said before, modeling is a lot like chess. If you can see a few moves into the future, you can actually go faster. So really learning to study what you're trying to build, analyze it, and understand it, because when you understand it, you can build it better and faster. So it's not a race to, you know, how fast can I get to the keyboard and the mouse? It's how quickly can I understand this object? And then that's really the path to building it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about component manipulation. I know you guys are anxious to get to modeling. You really want to change the shapes of the objects, so we have to play with the components in order to do that. Now, from last lecture, we talked about the various components. Who can tell me one of the components we learned last class? Vertex, right, Vivon, good job. The faces, nailed it. And the edges, good one, Chelsea, way to get it in. Don't give Vivon all of them. So yes, we've got those 3 primary modeling components: vertices, edges, and faces. And it's true, there are more components, and we'll talk about them as we go. But those are the three primary modeling ones. So we're going to get into some more manipulation of those guys to change shape. So the reality is we can use the tools in our toolbox to move the components around, just like we use the tools in our toolbox to manipulate and move around the polygon primitives. So it's the same basic principle, except that we're just working with components now rather than whole entities. Now, as I try to do as often as I can, and incorporate some fun stuff for you guys to work on. So we've got a little bit of polygon component manipulation that's going to take place here. So you see we've got the activity slide up, so everybody knows that the first thing we have to do is set our project to the activity file folder. So we get Maya up and running. Hi Maya, good morning. And now we're going to set our project. File, set project, and we choose the activity file folder and hit set. All right, and then we go to file, open scene, and the activity here we want is our, I want shape change activity. I think that's the one I want. So choose shape change and open it up. Tell you, it's been the bane of my existence that I renamed those files because I can't seem to get the new names in my head right. I have to give myself a hint on my slides. All right, so when you get to this scene, you will see I have some reference images in there. And again, we don't really need these in the perspective view, but there they are. And we've got some polygon primitives that we're going to change the shape of. Now, what we're going to do is, of course, we're going to use our orthographics because these are really the views that we model in. And who can tell me, because I know you guys remember from last lecture, what the setting is that I like to use so that I can see through the geometry and to the image behind? X-ray mode. Good job, Stephen. Absolutely. So X-ray, and that is under what menu item? Shading. Excellent. Stephen, all over it today. So I go to shading and I choose X-ray because again, I like to be able to see the image through that geometry. It's just much easier for me to work with. So as always, we're going to start over here towards the left, select my piece of geometry. And if I get really close here, I can see if I look at my silhouette and I look at the geometry I'm working with, it looks like the geometry occupies all the shape of the silhouette. So my front view is telling me I have done everything I need to do. But again, that's only half the story. So I have to go over to my side view and do the exact same thing. And again, I'm going to turn on the X-ray in the shading menu set over here as well so that I can see. So I look and I see, well, the silhouette is basically a square. My geometry is a square. Side view says I've got everything. Front view says I've got everything. Okay then, this thing that I'm building must be square in shape. So I'm done. Excellent. So now I'm going to go to the next one. All right, I select a piece of geometry. My silhouette is a square again, and my geometry occupies that space. So, okay, that's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to go to my side view and see, and I go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, I've got a bit of a dip in here. There's a change in shape. And what I want you guys to start thinking is as soon as you see a change in shape, what that means is I need components. I need edges to work with. I need vertices to work with to achieve that change. So that's your hint. Ah, change in shape. I need components. So in looking at this, I can see, all right, my geometry is kind of still square, but if I look at this thing, I see a change in shape. So what that means is I need to move components to achieve that shape. Now, last class, we grabbed the vertices and we moved them around to change the edge flow of the object, right? And if you did the bottommost row, you were actually changing the shape of the object and the form. But in this instance, we're actually going to be changing the form specifically, the 3D shape, the changes in this surface in order to help match the silhouette that we're going for. So in terms of making that change happen, first we have to go from object mode, which is what we're in now. Everything's green. We have to go to component mode. Who remembers how we do that? How do I go to component mode? Because I can't make any changes here. If I try to change this cube, the whole thing, no go, right? Ah, that's right. Right mouse button over the geometry, hold it down, and you'll see this circular menu set over this larger rectangular one. And this one's pretty cool too. But what we want to concentrate on is this circular menu set up here because these are the components. So I choose vertex or vertice, and you'll notice everything turns light blue, which means component. And then you'll see those pinkish purple dots, and those are our vertices. So I select one, and I use my move tool, because selecting and moving are two different things. So I select it and then switch to my move tool, and then I can drag it into position. Now you might go, well, wait a minute, what happened? It looks like my vertice duplicated itself. I moved it, but I still got something there. What happened? And what happened is when I moved my component, I want you to see I grabbed the vertice in the front only, not the one in the back. So when I moved it, it looks like my vertices duplicated themselves, but that's not what happened. What happened is I only grabbed the vertice in the front, not the back. So if I want this thing to change shape, I'm not going to do a point select of a component, meaning I don't just click right on that one thing. I'm going to do a marquee style selection. And what that means is I hold down my left mouse button and I create a selection box. And what this is going to allow me to do, and as long as I hold it down, I can make that box as big or small as I want. What that's going to allow me to do is grab not only the vertex in the front closest to me, but it will also grab the vertex in the back. So now that I have both of them selected, when I try to move my vertex, that's what I wanted. That's that change in shape I need. So if you come over here, you see that's a big difference in terms of what it did. Does that make sense? Excellent. Okay, and then we'll do the other thing, the same thing on the other side. So grab marquee style, make a selection box, and then drag and move. And then now, if I look at my shape, I go, okay, it dives in right here. It's matching now. I have the components to manipulate. So it looks good in my front view, looks good in my side view. Well, then this must be the shape. This is what it is, the shape and the form of the thing I'm supposed to be building. So there it is. It works. All right. So let's go to the next one. I'm going to go back to my front view. All right. Now we go to this one. A question. How do you quickly move in and out on the specific object? Well, here's what I'm doing. Of course, I'm using the Option key and my right mouse button to zoom in and out, because that's the combination of things in terms of getting to where it is you want to go. But the other thing that I'm using is if I'm very far from an object, if I select it and I press the F key, as in Frank, that's the focus button or frame button. You can use either one of those, whichever works for you. And that brings that object right to you. And then you're looking right at it and your camera spins around it. So that's how I can jump around kind of quickly to the things I want. But my hope is that you are using a 3-button mouse or your the pen that came with your tablet in order to navigate in here. All right. Now, let's do, well, make sure you have the right things selected. That is always a key. You got to take a look at what do I have selected, and it'll tell you up in your channel box what you have selected. So you can double check to make sure you're actually selecting what you think you're selecting. Now, in terms of this shape here, it's true, I can see these changes in shape. I've got a big change of shape going out. I got a big change of shape going in. And we've already learned, okay, that means I need components, and the components that you need are already in there. You can see there's an edge loop right where you need it, but the key is getting it into position. Now you might think, okay, I need to grab my vertices, right, and move them like I did before. Get these guys into position, right? These guys need to go this way, and these guys need to go this way, and that's moving the stuff around. And yes, I'm kind of matching the shape, but if you take a look at what I did, you look at that and you go, oh, that can't be right. That looks not good. What did you do, Professor Steve? That looks evil. And you're right, it is. It's terrible. That's bad looking geometry. And that's because I'm trying to move these components as though this object was flat, but it's not flat, right? This shape that we've got that we're working with, this is a cylinder. And the object that I've got here, if you look at it, is the front view and the side view are identical in their shape. So that leads me to believe, yeah, this thing is kind of cylindrical in shape. So yeah, I can't really work this thing like it's flat. So I'm going to change what I'm doing. Now what I'm going to do is try to move all of the components at the same time. So what I'm going to do there is right mouse button and choose vertex, just like I did before. Do a marquee selection of an entire row, just like I did before, but I'm going to switch to my scale tool. Now you might be thinking, oh, wait a minute, scale tool, that makes things bigger or smaller. Why am I selecting vertices and selecting my scale tool? And the reality is the vertice or the vertex is the smallest unit in terms of a polygon object. It doesn't get any bigger or any smaller. I can't make my vertices bigger. That's just how big they are. So if I select a bunch of them and I activate my scale tool, what they're actually going to do is if I scale big, they move away from each other. If I scale small, they get closer together. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, here's me scaling out, and you see it's now matching the silhouette, and I'll show you what that did out here in 3D, right? Scale out, scale out, scale out. And by scaling from the very middle, they all scale evenly in all directions. They scale out evenly and neatly. And then I can come in here and grab this section, and I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to scale from the middle and bring them towards each other. And again, it neatly and evenly brings them towards each other. And I'll come out here to 3D so you can see that as well. In. All right. And then now everything is tucked in, and you can see it's nice and neat, and it looks pretty clean. And Tony, if you are having problems with your front and side views, it's very possible you accidentally grabbed your image planes and you moved them. So all you got to do is reopen the file and don't save it. Just go to File, Open Scene, open the file again, and then you won't, and then the images will be lined up again. So you got to be very careful because these images can be selected and they can be moved, but you don't want to do that. You want to keep those things in place. And something that I do in my perspective view is I'll hide my image planes so I don't accidentally do that. I'll go to my show menu here and uncheck the word image planes, and then they're not visible there. And they're still where I need them because these guys have their own little show menu. So I don't have to worry about what I do and don't see. But, and as David has mentioned, you can put them on layers and template them, and there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do. So there's a number of different things, but what I would say is always, and this is a great habit to get into, when you select something, check and see what you actually have selected before you do anything, because you don't want to accidentally move something you don't want to. So as you're starting to see, Maya is a very active application. You can't sort of casually work with it. You got to be paying very close attention and be very focused at what you're doing, or you will accidentally do things you weren't planning on. Does that make sense? Fabulous. Okay, so again, it's about paying attention, not necessarily being super careful, because I don't want you to think, oh no, Maya's made of glass and I'll break it, because it's not. But you do have to pay very close attention. So just something to think about. All right, so we got that first piece done. So now we come into this guy. And here's where we're going to talk about how sometimes edges help to hold shape. Now, if you look at this shape, and again, if you look in my front view and you look at my side view, you can see I'm kind of looking at the same thing in both views. So obviously, this is, again, sort of a cylindrical based shape, and even on all sides. Now, I've got an edge up here, but, and it represents a change of shape. But if I change the shape of this, you see I kind of lose this shape up here, which is part of what I want to keep. So this edge, I actually need it here because without it, it's going to lose some shape. So this is what we call a holding edge, because this edge helps to keep the shape I've got. So what I need is to manipulate this group of edges. Again, marquee selecting the vertices and scaling from the middle and sending it out. Because if this edge loop wasn't here, then I wouldn't be able to do that. I'll get rid of that edge loop just so you can see. If I didn't have that edge loop, if I grab this and scale it out, I lose that top part up there. So some edges create changes in shape, and some edges literally hold some of the shape you've got. So I need these guys up here to maintain this, but I can grab these guys down here and scale them away from each other to create that change in shape. And then I end up with, you know, flying saucers. Danger, Will Robinson. So we need that. All right. Okay. Let's take a look at our next one. All right, so cylinder. He's probably doing a cylinder thing. Yeah, you're right. I am. This one's a little trickier. Yes, I have seen a little bit of the new Lost in Space. That's actually pretty cool. You know, not that I'm trying to promote Netflix or watching TV instead of doing your homework, which you should never do. But the new Lost in Space is pretty cool. I would recommend after you've turned in your assignments, and then you can watch a little Lost in Space if you wish. And I don't mean the skill checks, I mean the weekly one. When you turn, after you turn in your weekly turn in, then you can watch Lost in Space. But it is very cool. I like it a lot. Interesting writing for this one. All right, so again, let's go back over here to this next shape. And again, this is like, you know, woo, crazy changes in shape. And it's still using the same ideology in that we are going to grab the vertices, you know, marquee style, and we're going to scale them towards each other. But Professor Steve, you showed us this already. I know. But here's what I want to show you, a new wrinkle. All right. Now, it's true. I could grab this group of vertices and move them towards each other. Leave this group of vertices alone because that's kind of a holding edge. Grab this next row, bring them in, and then achieve the shape we want. But look at how much faster I can do that if I grab this row right here and then hold Control and Shift on my keyboard and then grab the next row down here, and I could literally scale them towards each other, right, to make it smaller, and then away from each other using the Y-axis to bring them back into position. All right. And Macs do have a control key. It's actually 3 keys to the left of your space bar. So look for that control key. It's on the left-hand side. All right. Now, here's the other thing. That was pretty fast. That was one little thing. No worries, Elizabeth. You know, maybe you just need the 4th cup of coffee and you'll be in there. So in terms of this this adjustment, okay, that was pretty fast. I scaled towards each other, and then I used the Y-axis to kind of spread them out a little bit. But how about this for an idea? look at your keyboard, that control key we were just talking about. You're going to love it. Hold down the control key and manipulate just the Y axis. And if you do that, watch how it comes in towards each other, but does not move towards each other in the vertical axis. And I just want to show you that in 3D so you can see it. This is really cool because what we're doing is when we hold down the control key and manipulate the Y axis, what we are telling Maya to do is scale on both X and Z, but ignore Y. I'm manipulating this one, but that means I don't want you to do this one. I want you to do this one and this one equally. So they move in at the same time, but they don't move towards each other in terms of the Y axis or up and down. It's a great way to make a change in shape and have more than one axis selected at that time. And again, super cool way to manipulate. And we're going to do this a couple of more times with some other activities today. So if you didn't catch it, we will do it again. And of course, you can always rewind these videos after we're all done and watch them again. All right. So again, great ways to manipulate components to make these interesting shapes. And this activity is a great one for learning how to play with those keys and so forth. And just like every activity we go over with you guys, don't save them. Close them out. In that way, you can open them again brand new with no adjustments on them, and you can practice again. And the more you practice, the better and the faster you're going to get. And that's what you want to do. Get faster, get better. And it's practice. That's it. So let's hop back on over to talking about groovy things here, components. And the reason now we're going to talk about geometry and polygon faces again is because we are going to delve into tools to help us make more changes in shape and how to add components to an object, because you're starting to see, oh, okay, so in order to make changes in shape, I need components. So we're going to get into the tools that help you add components, but you need to understand we can't just put them wherever we want to willy-nilly in any fashion we wish. We have to be careful about how we do that in terms of making sure we continue to create good mathematically sound geometry. It's not enough that it's pretty and it looks right. It also has to be mathematically sound. Almost like you could build a house that's really cool looking, but if you're not holding on to the structure elements that we incorporate into buildings these days to make them safe, it might just fall down. And then it doesn't matter how pretty it is, it's going to fall down. And ultimately, houses are not supposed to do that. So not only does it have to look good, it has to be mathematically sound. So we're going to talk a little bit about making sure we do that. All right, so polygon faces come in three basic varieties. We have the four-sided face, or the quad, and if you take a look at this piece of geometry here, you'll see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides on this face, so that is a quadded face. And we would like the objects that you guys build for this class to be composed of mostly, if not all, quadded faces. Now, that doesn't mean you can't build anything you want to. You can build anything you want to, but it is an added level of challenge because you got to get a four-sider on there. So it is a four-sided face, or a quad. Now there's also three-sided faces. So if you look at this face right here, you see it's got 1, 2, 3 sides. And we refer to this as a triangle or a trie. And you've probably seen video game assets referred to in terms of how many tries it is. And they're not talking about how many efforts it took to build the thing. They're talking about how many sides. 1, 2, 3 tries, 3 edges on this face, so it's a trie. We also have the naughty thing, and you can tell because it's red, right? Red is typically not good. This face here has more than 4 sides, and we refer to that as an n-gon. And I know if you look at it, you're thinking, no, wait, that's 4 sides, right? It's a square. Come on. ¿Qué pasó? Well, here's the deal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This vertice right here makes this 2 edges, not 1. So even though it looks square, this is a naughty no-no, n-gon. And the problem with n-gons is they lead to bad math. They lead to tools not working. They lead to files corrupting. They lead to render crashes and extended render times as well. So there's a bunch of things that are problematic with bad geometry. And one of the things that comes up big time is these n-gons in terms of causing problems. So the good news is, in terms of finding these problems and fixing them, we actually have a tool that will help us. We're going to get into that next class, but I just want you to know it's not up to you alone to figure out where the problem geometry is. Maya will help you. So that's the good news. So don't panic. It'll be okay, I promise. But we'll talk about that next class, but just be aware there is a tool to help you find that stuff. All righty, so any questions about tris, quads, or n-gons? Does that make sense? Good, okay, terrific. Terrific, just wanted to make sure everybody was on board. So let's talk a little bit about edge looping and topology. Edge looping or topology, and again, it's sort of a periwinkle colored vocabulary thing, so you know that's on the self-grade document. That is something we're grading on week 1, so you have to remember this when you're modeling. Edge looping and topology is a way to describe the way the edges or the lines on a model and how they flow across the surface of the geometry. And we're always going for neat, clean, efficient edge flow on our models. And it's really important to try to achieve that appearance of neat and clean. And in terms of edge looping and topology, if you take a look, you can see where there's a problem. You know, right here, this is an example of neat, clean, efficient topology. This looks like, you know, good edge looping. This person looks like they know what they're doing when they're modeling, right? If you look at this model, which is the same object, you can see the edge flow is very erratic. We've got some very strange shading errors going on here on the geometry. So, you know, in terms of neat and clean edge looping, it's pretty straightforward which is which. This is the neat and clean, and this is problematic geometry. All right, does that make sense in terms of edge flow and topology? And again, this is something we're looking for in the models you'll be turning in this week. Okay, good. And again, it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't look neat, you know, and it's, you know, if you didn't want to get technical about it, you could just say, well, if I looked at this, it looks like it got stepped on, and this one does not. So it's pretty straightforward. We want this, we want to avoid that. So we're working towards this all the time. All right, so make sure you've got, when you're building your models, just take a step back and look at the edge looping and just say, yeah, that looks pretty neat and clean. I like it, looks good. All right, so today, now we're gonna get into the meat of the day. We're gonna talk about what I call the big 3 tools, because you guys have come to the realization that changes in shape are really dictated by the components and where they are. So what we need to learn how to do is we need to learn how to manipulate, or how to create these components so that we can manipulate them using the tools in the toolbox. So the big 3 are the multi-cut tool, the insert edge loop tool, and the extrude tool. And they each have their sort of fun little things that they do. And it's important you understand how they work. So we're going to delve into those guys. And incidentally, if there's any question in your mind, am I doing a block out? Am I modeling? For week 1, we are modeling 3 assets. And in order to model, you have to use these 3 tools. So if you're not using the multi-cut tool, the insert edge loop tool, or the extrude tool, you're not actually modeling yet. So hopefully you guys will get the gist of that and realize you've got to use these tools. All right, so the big 3 tools. First, I'm going to demonstrate those guys for you, and then there's a fun little exercise that we can do together. So let me get back over to Maya. And again, first I'm going to demonstrate the tools, and then you will demonstrate them for me. So let's, I'm just going to clear this out so that I can demonstrate the 3 tools for you. All right, so let's say I'm trying to build a cute little house and, you know, with a little arched roof on it. And I'm not talking something complicated and crazy, you know, nothing nouveau style or anything like that. Just imagine a very simple house like you would find on a Monopoly board, that kind of thing. So if I'm trying to build a house here, what I've got right now for components is not really going to allow me to do that. You know, I can make a three-sided house, right? I can make one of those stylish new California houses, that kind of thing. But I can't really make that typical colonial style arched roof house that we see all over New England and in many other places as well with the components I have. So clearly I need to add something else. So here's where I need to add components because what I've got is just not enough. So in terms of my tools, I'm going to go to my mesh tools and I'm going to go to the first of the big three, the tool called the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut tool is basically a tool that slices geometry, and it's kind of like an X-Acto knife. It just put little cuts in there and it creates components by that process. The multi-cut tool works on edges, so that's where you're going to want to use it. So what I'll do is I go to the multi-cut tool and click on it with my left mouse button. And you'll notice right away my cursor has changed into this thing that kind of looks like a little X-Acto knife, because that's basically what it is. And you'll notice that as I move around on my geometry, these like laser beams are coming out of it, because you can see this tool wants to get busy here, but it's just trying to figure out what is it I want it to do. And what we're going to do is we actually bring the tool to the edge, right? Click with the left mouse button and hold it down. And you'll see that, oh, thank you, Dennis. And you'll see that it creates this dark blue dot with yellow numbers. And as long as I hold down my left mouse button, I can move that dot. As soon as I let go, I lose the ability to do that. So I want to hang on to it. And what that little blue dot is a vertice. It just hasn't been born yet. It's waiting to be born. And that yellow number is the percentage along this edge that I'm on. At one end, I have 100%, and at the other end, I have 0. So where am I? Well, if you want to be in the middle, you want to be on around 50, right? So if I want to try to line things up well, something I can do is hold Shift, and it will actually give me 10% increments. So I can get my way right to 50. And then when I get there, I let go. Now this vertice has not been cut in yet. And if you look at the tool, it's asking about close. You can see it's writing that on the bottom. It's like, okay, what are we going to do next? So what I'm going to do is go to the far edge over here, and again, click with the left mouse button and hold it. And it would be really hard for me to find that 50% mark again without holding down my Shift key. So then again, I get my 10% increments, so I can choose the 50% mark and then let go. So now I've got a vertice on one end, a vertice on the other, and an edge that connects them. So all I have to do is click with my right mouse button or hit enter, either one, and Maya will actually cut that edge in there. So now I've got this new edge and it's right in the middle, right? But if you look at my hand right now, I still have that X-Acto knife in my hand. So if I try to work on this thing, and if I try to manipulate this edge, I'm going to continue to use my tool. I'm going to keep cutting, but I don't want to cut. I want to move this edge. So I have to switch from my tool that does the cutting to my tool that does the moving. So I switch to my move tool, and now I choose edge mode. I select the edge, and then with my move tool selected, now I can move the edge into place, and that's what gives me my happy little house. All right. All right. And so now I've got, yay, I've got a house, and this will keep the rain and the snow out. And, you know, that looks like a 2-floor job here, to be honest with you. So this thing is ready to rock and roll. Now, Elizabeth is asking me, well, what about the percentages? You know, and I'm sure what she's wondering, you know, can you do other than 10%? And the answer to that is absolutely. If you go to the tool, again under Mesh Tools, Multi-Cut, remember I told you guys that little box is the options box. So I click on that with my left mouse button, and you'll see that the snap step is currently set for 10%. So if I want it to go every 5%, I'll just put a 5 up there. So again, just be aware, that's how you can make that adjustment. Now Dennis is going, wait a minute, I see an N-gon in there. And you're right, this is a naughty no-no. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So what I'm going to have to do is fix it. And the best tool for fixing N-gons is the multi-cut tool. That's its best job, really. So what I'm going to do is, again, come to this edge and click on it with my left mouse button and hold. And I'm going to drag the vertice by holding my left mouse button and move my mouse. And I'm going to drag until the vertice gets stuck. It literally won't go any further past that point up at the top. And then when I get it stuck, I'm going to let go. And then I'm going to come down to the bottom of my geometry, click and drag. But again, I can hold shift so I can get to the exact point, the 50% mark. Whoops. And delete will let you go backwards one move if you want, which is cool. So you can undo something by hitting delete. Hang it up there, click here, drag, hold shift, get to that 50% mark and let go. And then again, right mouse button or hit enter, whichever you wish, and it cuts in the edge, right? So now this face has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and this face has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So they're both quadded. So this edge helped me change the shape. This edge helped me hold the shape. And this edge doesn't do either one of those, but what it helps me do is maintain quadness. And I need that. So even though this doesn't change my shape, even though this doesn't hold my shape, I need this edge because it maintains the four-sidedness. Now, if you come down here, yay, it looks like it's 4 sides, but it's actually not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Danger, Will Robinson. So the problem here is this vertex here makes this 2 edges, not 1. So guess what tool I need to use to fix it? That was the interactive portion of the show there. Yeah, thank you, Vivon. Multi-cut. So I go to Mesh Tools, I get out the multi-cut, and again, click and drag until it gets stuck, and then I come to this side, click and drag, I hold down the shift to get the 50% mark, and you know I'm going to have to go up here as well, so click and drag. See, I can put more than one edge down at a time. And then I'm going to hit enter or right mouse button, and now my model has the shape I want, right? It's got the holding edges and the edges that create changes in shape, and it's fully quadded. Everything is in there. And yes, Dennis, it is a happy house, right? Clean geometry is happy geometry. So we always try to do that. All right, so that's the multi-cut tool. Very, very handy. Now, let's take a look at the insert edge loop tool. The insert edge loop tool is kind of like its name implies. It inserts an edge loop. So, and it's also under Mesh Tools, and it's right up here. And this tool is kind of a cool one because it'll save you some time. So the way this tool works, and again, you notice my cursor looks different now. It looks kind of like a little paper airplane. This tool also works on edges, but it behaves a little differently. If I click with the left mouse button, it creates a dotted green line. And as long as I hold down that left mouse button, I can move that dotted green line anywhere I want. So what I'll do is I will move that dotted green line to where I want it and then let go. And then like a lightsaber through butter, it just slices through the whole object. And now I can manipulate it. So if I go to my move tool, you'll notice, you see all the edges are selected. So if I move it right now, everybody moves, right? That's not what I wanted. That doesn't look like my house. So what I'm going to do is instead click off into space, click just the edge on the top, and now, yay, now I've got the house that I wanted, and I did it in one move. I put that edge loop in there, and it's fully quadded. And that's what's kind of neat about the Insert Edge Loop tool. I call it a safe tool, because if your geometry is quadded to begin with, it will not unquad your geometry. The multi-cut tool is crazy. That thing will let you cut any old crazy configuration you want. It'll make n-gons all day long. But the Insert Edge Loop tool will leave your geometry just as four-sided as it was when you got started. So again, it's sort of a safe tool to use. So I can literally use my Insert Edge Loop tool and just drop in edges anywhere I want on this thing, and then just scale them out. And I know every face on this thing is four-sided, you know, and I can drop in crazy edges anywhere I like and make just the craziest shapes ever, right? And again, everything's got four-sided. Now, oh yeah, thank you. Like I said, I wish Maya came with sound effects, but it doesn't. So I just make noises while I'm working with it. And is there a 50% hold shift to get it to do that? No, I wish there was. There is not. But there's other tools that we can use in order to trick Maya into doing what we want to, which is put it in the 50% mark. But again, a really handy, really fast tool, and you can make all kinds of interesting stuff very quickly with it. And that's why we like that tool. And like I said, it's a safe tool. It doesn't make unquadded geometry. Look out! And yes, you can absolutely multiply the number of loop lines, because if you look at your Insert Edge Loop tool, you can see, well, how many edges do you want? And honestly, a great rule of thumb is if you can do something in one 3D application, you can probably do it in all the others, because 3D is 3D. There may be different ways of doing it, different names for the tools, but they're more or less the same. So it's just a function of figuring out what the heck do they call it and where is it. Yeah, and watch out, that end is pointy, right? No, touch the point. Ouch. All right, so that's the Insert Edge Loop tool, which does some pretty cool stuff. So now we have to learn the Mac Daddy of them all, and that will help you make most of the changes that you need to make, and that is using the Extrude tool. Now the Extrude tool is under Edit Mesh, so it's in a slightly different place, right? But in terms of its behavior, it extrudes vertices, edges, and faces, which is pretty cool. So if you extrude a vertex, just grab a vertex, Edit Mesh, Extrude, you'll see you get kind of, it's not great geometry. It looks pretty wacky, and it's a Rhino cube, but you can actually extrude a vertice. And I have to show you this because it's so wacky. If you grab all of your vertices at one time and do an extrusion, you get one of those things, which is very pointy if you step on it. And if you do it, several extrusions in rapid succession, you get really weird looking stuff. But like I said, you typically don't extrude vertices because that's not overly helpful, but it is fun. Now, something that you can do if you need to is extrude edges. And if you grab an edge and do an extrusion, what you will see is that you get a single, very thin plane of geometry. And it's almost like, well, not even almost, it is basically a piece of paper. It's so thin. And again, unless you were modeling a piece of paper, you wouldn't want to extrude an edge. But if you extrude an edge, this is how you get it. And if you, let's say, for example, you wanted to extrude two edges at once, can you do that? Absolutely. You can extrude two edges at once. You can extrude two vertices at once. So, you can create all kinds of interesting shapes with the tool. But way more often than not, and I mean 99% of the time, if not more, when you're doing an extrusion, you're working with faces. And in terms of the behavior of the tool, the extrude tool is sort of a two-phase tool. First, it makes the components you need, and then you manipulate the components into place. And it's got all kinds of cool functions in terms of the neat shapes that you can make and how quickly you can make them. And extrusions don't have to just go up. You know, extrusions can also go in and make things look hollow, and then they can make smaller faces inside of larger faces, and then take those faces and extrude them back out again, and then take that face and extrude that, and make a much larger face in there. Pull that into position and make a smaller face inside of that. All right, get that guy in there. Do another extrusion, pull it out. Do another extrusion, bring it in. And look, now we can watch Lost in Space together. So you can see the extrude tool is pretty cool. It works really fast and it makes some crazy looking stuff, right? Now, let's take a look at how this thing works and how you get it to create the crazy shapes you need to create. So first we're going to grab a face and we go to Edit, Mesh, Extrude. All right. Now, when I do the extrusion, you see the tool shows up. And like I said, it's a two-phase tool. First, it creates the new faces that you need. You can't see them, they're inside, but it does make them, they're in there. The next thing we have to do is manipulate it. Now, in terms of manipulation, you will see hidden in the extrude tool, the move tool, right? You see the arrows of the move tool. Do you see the cubes of the scale tool? And you'll see the rotation ring of the rotate tool, and that's because the extrude tool has all of these tools built in one. It's like the Swiss Army knife of tools. So if I want to pull the geometry out, I'm going to use the arrows, and notice I'm not grabbing the cubes, I'm grabbing the arrows, and I pull the geometry out. If I want to change the size or the scale, I can grab just the cubes. Again, not the arrows, the cubes, and I can scale my geometry in. If I want to rotate something, I click the outer ring, and then that gives me the rotational capacity of the tool, so I can put that into place. I can do additional extrusions, Edit, Mesh, Extrude, and I can make a smaller face inside of a larger one by holding down the Control key, manipulating the Z-axis. And if you remember, when we were scaling things before, we were holding Control and we were manipulating the one axis we didn't want it to move on when we were scaling the vertices. This is the same thing. You hold Control and manipulate the Z-axis so that it moves in on Y and X at the same time, evenly. And again, extrusions don't have to go just out. You can do an extrusion and have it go in. And here's where we can push into something and make it appear to be hollow. And again, we can make a smaller face inside of a larger one by holding Control, doing an additional extrusion, hold Control and manipulate the Z-axis, and it makes a smaller face inside of the larger one. And if you look at this face, you can see it's not going in or out. It's just literally making a smaller face inside of a larger one. And when we do that, you know, again, we could do additional interior extrusions, or we could pull it out again. You know, it's really up to us in terms of what we want to accomplish, right? And we can make all kinds of fun stuff. Come get it, alien slime. So you can see it does some pretty neat things. That is a huge control center with that little tiny gun. These guys are in trouble. That is definitely not going to take down a Star Destroyer. All right. So again, the extrude tool, super handy at making interesting stuff. So here's where we're going to practice it together. So again, this is another fun little exercise. So I'm going to go to File, Open Scene, and you'll see that there's something called the Big 3 activity. So we're going to open that guy up. Boop, don't save. And we've got 3 houses. And I put them on a layer so that you can't mess with them, other than hide and show. But you can't really mess with them. But what I did do was make it so that you could see the edge looping. And the way I did that, this is another fun little thing you can do. If you go to your shading menu set, there's something called wireframe on shaded. It's right above X-ray. And what that does is it allows you to shade your geometry solidly, but you can also see the edge looping of the geometry, which is very helpful sometimes. So I got that all set up. It looks pretty good. And what I want you to do is try to build these 3 houses, and you can build them with me. I'm going to make 3 cubes first. So I create a cube, and I move it into position. Make another cube, move it into position, and then make my final cube. So now I've got my 3 pieces of geometry I need. And on the first one, I'm going to use multi-cut. On the middle one, I'm going to use insert edge loop. And on the last one, I'm going to use the extrude tool. So again, in terms of creating these changes, I'm going to go to Mesh Tools and find my multi-cut. All right. And I'm going to be working with this guy right here. So here I am. I've got my tool going. And I'm going to go to the edge, click and hold with the left mouse button. And what do I hold to get to my percentages in terms of placing this accurately? Shift. Well, Vivan has had plenty of coffee today. And Clavin too. Here we go. Let's go. All right, we got it held down. And we hop over to 50%. And I'm like you, Vivan. I'm buzzed on life. I don't need coffee. So here we go on this edge right over here, and I hold Shift. And again, you saw it wanted to go to 50 right away, but I just wanted to show you that 10% hopping, right? And I get that in there. And then once I've got that edge in place, what do I have to do? To get out of the tool, does anybody remember? I can right click, absolutely. Right click will get me out of it. I can hit enter on my keyboard, or I can choose a different tool. Any and all of those will work. So whatever you got to do to get out of that tool. All right, so now I go to edges because I want to move that edge, and I select it, and then I go to my move tool, and then I move it. And then that's what gives me my first house. All right. All right, and as Brian said, you can press Q on your keyboard, which gives you your select tool. It's another way to get out of it. All right, so let's take a look at this middle house. The middle house, I'm going to use my mesh tools, insert edge loop on this one. And again, it works on edges, so what I want to do is come to the edge, click with my left mouse button, and hold it, and it gives me that dotted green line. And I can try to line it up by eye. And you see I'm trying to line it up with that middle edge there. Or something else you can do, which is what we typically do, is once you get that edge in there, all right, I got to switch to my move tool. You notice I still have all the edges selected, right? I didn't let go of anybody. And what I'm going to do is, if you look at your keyboard, do you see the key X as in Xavier? If you hold down the X key, you activate Maya's snapping function, and X is snap to grid. So I can literally, with this edge selected, holding X, boop, I can snap it on any grid, and the grid is right in the middle of my cube. So now my edge loop is right in the middle of my cube. And you'll notice again, I don't try to move my edges while they're all selected, or I get a tent. I don't want a tent, I want a house. So I'm just going to grab the edge on top and move it. And that's what gives me my fun little house. Then we go to the last house. And again, this one we're going to be using the extrude tool on. So I go to face mode, select just the face on top, edit mesh, extrude. And it's made the new faces for me. It's given me that cool manipulator, so it's time for me to get to work. I grab the arrows because I want to move it. And no, I did not have to press X again to get out of Snap to Grid. I just let go of it, let go of the X key. It may stick and you might have to hit it again to undo it, but typically when you let go, it lets go. So I grab the arrow here, right? And I raise it up. That's what gives me my new geometry. Now it's true, I could grab the green cube and scale it in, then grab the red cube and scale it in order to make my roof, right? Because that's how I make that smaller. But we talked about how to move on two axes at the same time evenly. What did I do to do that? Do you guys remember? I want it to move on Y and X at the same time. So I'm going to manipulate the Z axis in conjunction with control. Absolutely. So I hold the control key down and I manipulate the Z. And then you see X and Y move at the same time, which is super cool because they're nice and even that way, right? And then I can make sure that my house has an even shape change on there, on that roof. And honestly, flat roofed houses leak anyway, so it doesn't matter. What I do, it's gonna leak. All right, so there's our three houses using the big three tools. Now, the good news is, I know you're thinking, wow, okay, this extrude tool, it seems complicated. It seems like I need to get better at it. And the answer to that is, yes, you do need to get better at it. And what we're going to do is we have another activity using the extrude tool. And the reason this activity is super important is because during this lesson, we realized that if we want to change the shape of an object, we need to manipulate the components. And anywhere there's a change in shape, that means manipulate components. We also learned that there have to be components there in order to manipulate. So we have to create components. But what gets kind of fuzzy is, well, do I manipulate components or do I use a tool? I'm not sure. I know I need to change the shape. How do I find the solution? Because, you know, the extrude tool is a very powerful tool, but it doesn't fix everything. So typically when I show people, okay, this is the extrude tool, this is how it works, they think that no matter what the problem is, extrude tool is the solution. You know, oh, I need more components, extrude tool. Oh, this needs more curvature, extrude tool. I'm having trouble paying my taxes, extrude tool. And the reality is that's not what that's for. So you got to make sure you're thinking about the process properly to in order to do a good job of creating whatever it is you're going to create. So what I did was I created this exercise that uses both component manipulation and extrude. So you kind of have to see how those two things differ, but how they work together. So again, this is another activity in there. So I go to File, Open Scene, and the tool I want is, or the file I want is Manipulate Components and Extrude Activity. It's the longest one. So choose that one and open it up. No need to save this. We can go back and practice if we want. Now, the way this exercise works is, again, I've got a layer to keep you from being able to touch the lighter colored yellow objects, but the green ones you can grab. And the way this particular exercise works is the yellow is your objective. This is what you want your geometry to look like. The green, or the darker one, is what you have to work with. And I've got to somehow make this look like that. So let me show you the first one. The first one, you know, obviously this is a cube. So to make it rounded, I have to kind of round the corners. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to component mode, and we're just going to grab the edges on the corners, and I got to get the top one and the bottom one on all sides, right? And, oh, actually, let me do this. Grab those edges on the corner, and using my move tool, I can move them into place, right? And let me give you a little top view of that as well so you can see it going on, right? Move it into place. Grab this edge, and again, move it into place, move it into place, right? And they're all happy edges. Thank you, Bob Ross. There we go. There we go. And you can see it's starting to round because I'm moving the edges of this object. And again, typically we work in a maximized window, but sometimes I will work with all my windows showing so you can see what I'm doing. So this is, you wouldn't necessarily want to work in such a small window. It'll give you a headache. All right, so now I've rounded my object, right? This was my goal. This is what I did. And you can see I did round it, but it doesn't look quite as good as this one. So what I'm going to do instead is a trick that I have showed you already, right? Remember we talked about using the control key and manipulating one axis so it will ignore the other two. So here is, I've got my scale tool, right? And I'm going to hold control and I'm going to manipulate the green axis, which means it will move on both X and Z, but it will ignore the green one. If I do it while holding nothing, they all, see, that doesn't work. That's not what I wanted. So I hold control and manipulate the Y and everything moves in together, right? And I'll do that so you can see it up here as well. Watch it in this view. Control, manipulate Y. They all move in evenly. And then, wow, look at that. It looks just like the other one. So there's a greater level of precision there in using that. All right, so now this looks like that. Yay, next challenge. So now I go to this guy and I go, okay, look, I got this thing sticking up. I've got a very sharp change in shape. This is what I have to work with. All right, definitely not manipulating what I already have, because if I grab these faces and I move them, that's not really doing that. I've got a change in shape here. So I know I need the extrude tool. So I go to Edit Mesh and I choose Extrude. Now if I pull it up, okay, that's not what I wanted. I need a smaller one to come up out of the middle of this bigger one. So what I'm going to do again is hold control and manipulate the Z axis. And again, what that's doing for me is it's creating a bunch of faces in the middle of my face. And it's not sticking out, it's not sticking in, it's the same level as the surface. All I'm doing is making a smaller face inside of the larger one. And I'm just doing that again by holding the control key while manipulating the top axis, Z in this case, after I did the extrusion. Now, if I grab the arrow now and pull it up, no, that's not what I wanted. It shouldn't go up like that. It should stay flat. So what that's telling me is I need another extrusion. So I go to Edit Mesh and I'm going to do another extrusion. And then, oh yeah, that's what I wanted. That gave me, yay, yay, happy polygons. There we go. All right, so solve that problem. Let's go to the next one. So when I look at this one, added level of challenge. All right, I need to pull a shape out of here, right? I need a smaller face inside of a larger one. So I need to do that extrude trick just like I did here, but this one is round, kind of like the first one that I did. So this is sort of both of those. So here we go. Grab the faces, right? Is what we did before. Edit Mesh, Extrude, just like we did before. Hold Control, manipulate Z, just like we did before. Now here's where it gets different. Now, when you look at the faces we made, just like we did over here, when you look at these faces, you see, oh, I see a square, right? If I extrude that, Edit Mesh, Extrude, all right? If I extrude that, I get another square. oh, but this thing is round. So that's not really what I wanted. So let's take a look at this idea. When you do an extrusion, whatever the shape is here, that's the shape you get. So what if I grab the vertices at the corners by holding Shift and just bring them all nearer to each other so that I have a round shape to begin with? Oh, so now when I grab these faces and I do an extrusion, that's the shape I get. Oh, so whatever shape I make, right? If I make a Pac-Man shape with my vertices, right, and I grab that shape and I do an extrusion, and if you don't know what Pac-Man is, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. So if I grab my Pac-Man and I pull him up, that's what I get. So it's all about making the faces into the shape you need, right? And then you can pull it up. So in this instance, if I make that round shape, I can then do the extrusion, and then I get what I want, that nice cylinder shape. Now, no, I know, you got to do the sound, waka, 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 waka. All right, so let's take a look at, do I have to make it round first? No, if you want to, you could grab the faces, do edit, mesh, extrude, pull that bad boy up, and then do the same thing as we did over here. Grab the edges, right? Because this is what we did before. Grab the edges, make sure you got everybody, get that scale tool in there, hold Control and manipulate Y. That's going to round it also. So there's not a right or a wrong, it's two totally different ways of accomplishing the same thing. So as long as it looks right when you're done, it doesn't make a difference which one you did first or which approach. It's just about making sure you're hitting shape and form, because that's the important part. All right. So again, looking at this, oh, all right, pulling a cylinder, but it's already a cylinder, so that's going to be easier. So I can grab that face, edit mesh, extrude. Again, holding Control, manipulate the blue cube. It comes in on X and Z. I'm sorry, X and Y. And then, again, if I pull it straight up, I get that, which is not what I want. So I'm going to have to do another extrusion to get that rounded shape. All right. And I've got an end gun on top, so I'm going to have to use my multi-cut to fix it. Right? Cut, cut, enter, cut, cut, enter. And now I've fixed that. Okay. Now, here's an interior extrusion. Oh no, somebody hold me. Yes, we've got to do an interior extrusion. So if that's my goal, let's say I'm building, oh, I don't know, the jar, I'm going to have to make the jar hollow. So what that means is grab the face on top, edit mesh, extrude, right? Hold Control, manipulate the blue axis so it moves in on the Y and the X at the same time. And then, again, you don't just push it straight down. There's a little bit of a lip up here, right? So what I'm going to do is an additional extrusion, edit mesh, extrude, and push it down in. And then now I have a more jar-like appearance. All right, so not so bad. All right, and Dennis was asking, should we use the edge loop tool? And the answer is no, you actually have to use the multi-cut tool, because the insert edge loop tool won't cut faces that are n-gons, so you can't really fix n-gons with the edge loop tool. And it's also, you know, a lot harder to control, believe it or not, in terms of trying to quad things. And that's why I do show you all three of those tools, because you really do need the multi-cut. To be honest with you, if I had to only show you two, because somebody was saying you only get 2 tools, I would have shown you multi-cut and extrude, not the insert edge loop. But it's one of those things where certain tools are good in certain ways, and don't worry about the OCD thing. 3D modeling is OCD. So you found your home, my friend. That's what it's all about. Detail, detail, detail. There's got to be a way, and figuring out what that way is by whatever means necessary. So good for you. All right, now in terms of the interior extrusion, so now I've got, again, what looks a little bit more like a jar. So that's going to help me out tremendously when it comes to modeling the jar. All righty, and let me see. Here's a little something I just want to throw your way in terms of some modeling tips and suggestions. Let's say I was trying to create a specific shape on the side of an object, you know, like a handle or something that I was trying to pull out of there. Something that I will do sometimes when I'm trying to do that is I will use 2 different shapes together and try to get them to, I'm using one as a template and one as the actual object. So let's say, for example, let me just freeze these so that I can move them around at will, and they'll go back to where they're supposed to be, right? If I move it out of the way, if I plug in all zeros, they go back. Let's say, for example, I'm trying to extrude out of the side of this cylinder, right? I want to make a rounded shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this cylinder as sort of a template to guide the edge looping that I'm going to need. So what I would do is use my multi-cut tool, right? But I would use it on this object here. And what I'm going to do is cut the shape that I need into this piece over here. And what I'm doing is I'm tracing one piece of geometry with the other to cut in some edge looping. And then with this piece, now it's given me, you know, sort of the guide for the shape I need. Then now I can utilize other tools to move these edges out. So for example, I get my multi-cut tool here, and I can grab right here and put it over here, connect that, take this, go from here to here, connect that, create this and put it from over here to over here, and then put this over here and put it over there, hit that, and then now I've got these vertices in place that I could use to make that rounded shape, right? And I can actually take this piece and move it back in to make sure I've got it going right where I want it, right? Vertex, grab that guy, and I'm going to go to this view here where I'm looking right at it, go to wireframe mode, and I say, okay, where do I need to put that vertice to make it line up right? Where do I want that guy? Right in there. That's looking good. That's looking pretty good. Get that guy over there, line up with that one. Get that guy, line him up over there with that one. And then what that helps me do is create the shape I need. I could delete that if I want to, because now I can grab these faces here and extrude right out that nice cylinder shape that I need in terms of my, let's say I was making like a teapot handle or something like that. And you'll notice that when I extrude, it kind of flares out a little bit, and that's because there's some curvature on this geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little icon right up here, and that will allow me to pull straight out off of true axes, and that will allow me to pull out that nice shape. And as some of you are noting, oh, but I've got some n-gons in there. So guess what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to fix it. So I'm going to have to use my Insert Edge Loop tool and drop in an edge, and then use my multi-cut tool and fix it. Does that make sense? So I end up having to go back in, use my Insert Edge Loop tool, drop it in. I know it's going to have to go around there roughly, because that's where that edge is connecting. And as you can see, it won't cut this face because this face is an n-gon, and that's why we need that multi-cut tool, because multi-cut will cut those faces. I go to my multi-cut tool, and I go back in, and again, fix what I damaged from my initial setup. But it does allow me to create sort of complex shapes that I need in order to make my geometry look right. And of course, I'm going to need one more insert edge loop here in the middle, which I will then get my multi-cut tool and reconnect so that I'm fully quadded, because again, no matter what shape you're making or whatever change in shape, you want to try to quad that stuff out. All right. And again, if you notice here, that is a four-sided face. 1, 2, 3, 4. So even though it looks like it might be a triangle, I really tried to make it four-sided wherever I could. Now this one does have 3, but again, I could easily fix that by using my multi-cut tool, coming out here just a tiny bit, and then cutting that in, and then deleting the interior edges, and then now I'm back to four-sided there. And as Brian said, some triangles here and there are totally fine, so don't worry about that. That's not the end of the world. My bigger concern, of course, is trying to get good shape, good form, and maintain quadness as many places as you can. Some triangles are okay, n-gons are never okay. So make sure you're fixing those. And then, you know, like I said, you can make all kinds of stuff because you're literally, you know, designing the shapes you need for the extrude tool to create. So it's super handy in terms of creating nice looking geometry, good edge flow. You know, these are the kinds of things that we are always trying to do. Because it makes our models look better. And I threw that last one in there for you, just so that you can see, you can create any shape you need, you can do it. It's just gonna take some time for you to create the components you need, use the correct tools, and kind of tinker with it. And that's what you're gonna be doing when you're modeling. So when you're looking at these different objects that you need to build, make sure that you are trying to see the edge flow that it would take to create the changes in shape. Try to see what tools you're going to need. You should be thinking about that stuff even before you start, because I think a lot of times people are, when they first start trying modeling, they're like, okay, it's time to model. I got my picture, I set my project. Now what do I do? I have no idea. And for those folks, I actually made a little video for you guys to watch, and you can watch it. And I believe it's called Getting Started, but it's a little video where I basically take a reference image into Photoshop, and I just talk about looking at the image and seeing the edge flow it would take to build that object, and just sort of the process. How do I break it down? Talking about break it down by materials, talk about changes in shape, talk about holding edges. So make sure that you take a look at that video, especially if you are new to 3D, because I think even if you're not new to 3D, it's good strategy. So make sure you take a look at that because it's going to help out a lot. And that video should be at the beginning. Actually, it should be on the activity page for the week 1 assignment. I'll take a quick look and see, because I think that's where it is. There's your week 1 assignment. And again, we talk in, there's a turn-in procedure video. Please make sure you watch that, because it's very specific how you have to turn in this thing. So make sure you're looking at that video. It talks about the directions about how to do that. It talks about the Maya scene that we give you with the columns in it, and you're going to take your objects and put them on those columns. You're only building 3 though. There's 5 columns, so it's okay that 2 of them won't have something in it. We talk about the idea of scale, making sure that you scale the object to the correct size or it won't fit on the pillars properly. So make sure you do that. Here's an example of what your first scene would look like. You know, there's 3 models in here, and you can see, here they go. We give you the naming conventions so that you know exactly how to name that file. Of course, we are 1805, not 1705, so make sure you get that right. And don't put my name in there, because I have already passed this class, so you need to put your name in there. Here's the Maya file of the columns, so make sure you've got that display scene. And then, of course, make sure you're looking at your week 1 tab on your self-grade document, because it lists everything we're looking for in terms of your grade. So as long as you're looking at this, you're going to do great. If you ignore this, that's where you're not going to do as well on your grade. And of course, we've given you a copy of the self-grade document on this activity as well. So take a look at all this stuff. And again, you can see, what are we grading on? Silhouette, right? Does it look right when we look at its shadowy outline? Form, surface details, depth-related details, asset built-in parts. Is it made of the right number of parts? You know, if it's a jar with a lid, the lid is separate from the jar. That's 2 pieces, so make sure you build it that way. And edge looping and topology. Does it look neat and clean, or are the edges really messy? Layers. Did you create a layer, and does it work? Is the layer named and the object is on it, and when you click on it, does it disappear? Did you turn it in presentation mode? And again, presentation mode, the idea is, you know, whenever you finish whatever it is you're doing, you just make sure that you center your object within all of your cameras. And you can do that, like, if everything was like way off and you're like, whoa, where's the middle for everything? I don't know. Just marquee select everything and hit Shift F, and that will center everything in all 4 views. And then, of course, we put everything into wireframe, and we all know that the 4 key is how we get to wireframe. And that's because wireframe actually opens faster than shaded mode. And then that's how you save it, and that's presentation mode. So, you know, that's what those points are associated with. Did you name it right? And again, we give you the name. So the only reason you get this wrong is if you ignore this. So you got to make sure you don't ignore this. And then again, there's not that many things I'm asking for, so make sure you don't miss any of them, because you lose a lot of points for not doing them. So make sure you do these things. There's not that much. And really just this part is, does it look right? The rest of it is other technical things, organizational things. Again, this is the other, you know, 65% of your grade, 65, 70%. So you got to do this to make sure you get all those points. And then you'll do terrific. But like I said, make sure You know, big ticket items are make sure you watch the turn-in procedure video and make sure you watch that video that talks about getting started before you model so you could see. And in terms of saving it, it couldn't be easier. You know, when you're done, you just go to File, Save Scene As, and then you have to name it right, of course. It'll be gold underscore Steve underscore. This will be my week 1 assignment for 3DF, the class, and this is 1805. Now, the thing you do have to be very, very aware of is take a look at the type of file the original is to make sure you save it. So if you take a look, this just happens to be the manipulate components and extrude activity. And if you look here, manipulate components and extrude activity, you'll see it's an MA file, Maya ASCII. So what you have to make sure you do is come down here and from the drop down of files of type, switch it to Maya ASCII and it will save it as an MA now. You can't just type MA at the end, you have to switch it to ASCII, MA. So all you have to do is look at what the original file was and make sure that when you save it, you're saving it as the same kind. All right, and that's easy. So just make sure you do that. Alrighty, so make sure you're looking at that self-grade document, read over the instructions, watch those little videos. They make a huge, huge difference. I want you guys all to do great. I love it when a class does really well and everybody gets high marks. Well, because that makes me feel like a smarty and it makes me feel like I did a good job. But I know you're on the path to doing things right and you're going to be more successful in the future. And you know, I want you guys to do great. I want someone to say, wow, who taught you how to do this? You know, and if in some small way, something that I said or did helps you get that job that you are dreaming of, that you want, I will be the happiest guy ever. I think that's one of my favorite phone calls or emails. And I know Brian feels the same way. When we hear that you guys are, you know, working on Iron Man or something like that, that is just the coolest feeling ever. So, you know, I try my best to make sure you guys understand what it is that is going to be expected of you, not only in the next class, but in the industry as a whole. So it's important. Believe me, it seems silly, and I know it's the very beginning, it's the first class, but even right now, the stuff we do is very important. So make sure you are, again, paying extra close attention to this stuff. It really will make a difference in your level of success. Alrighty, guys. In terms of the assignments, are we pretty solid on what it is we need to do? Okay, good. Now, if you take a look at our skill check for this turn-in, the skill check is we're going to have you build the jar again, but this time, instead of creating shapes and shoving them together, you're going to use your tools of modeling, the big 3, and you're going to model the jar. And again, it's not horribly complicated, but you have to use those big 3 tools. We can't shove things together. So I'll just show you quickly. I'm going to set my project to my skill check files because that's what that is. And I'm going to open up the jar asset start. And again, we're using the same file. And you might think, oh, we're just doing the same thing again. But no, we are not using the same thing. We're using the same starting file, but we are building it totally different this time. So this time, I am going to create a cylinder, right? That's going to happen. I'm going to put it into X-ray mode. That's going to happen. I'm going to make it the right size, put it into place, right? I'm going to check all of my views and make sure I'm lining up in all of them, right? But some things are going to be different. This time, I'm going to pull this shape up to here, right? Wait a minute, we didn't do that before. Before we were blocking out. That's right. That's because this time we are not blocking out. This time we are modeling. And that modeling means we're using tools like the insert edge loop tool, right? So I'm going to drop some edges in here. I see a change in shape. I see some shadow, right? That means that's an edge loop. I need that. So I'm going to drop an edge loop in there. All right. Now it's going to have to come out. So I'm going to have to drop another edge loop in there, right? That's going to allow me to bring stuff out because that's my goal. Bring it out. I'm going to grab this, move it down, right? Now, this is kind of sharp in terms of that angle. Maybe I should put one, an edge loop on either side. Maybe I should put one here and put one here, because with both of those, scale tool, holding control, I'm going to manipulate the Y so it moves in X and Z simultaneously, but ignores Y. Now I get a little bit more rounding. All right. So now that's looking pretty good. How about we do the top of this thing, right? Let's do those bits on the top. So let's grab all these faces on top. All right, holding Shift to add to my selection. Grab all those guys. All right, come back over here, Edit Mesh, Extrude, pull it up. All right, holding Control, manipulate Z, flare it out. All right. Now I need to have a little bit of a lip on there, so I'm going to have to do an additional extrusion, Edit Mesh Extrude. Because if I don't do that, you know, that's not what I want. So I'm going to have to do an additional extrusion, holding Control, manipulate Z, bring it in a little bit, right? Give me a little bit of a lip there. And then again, if I go straight in, no, that's not it. I'm going to have to do another extrusion in, Edit Mesh Extrude, bring it down so that I get a little bit of a lip up there, right? If I come over here, you see how my jar kind of slopes here? But my interior goes straight down. Well, you and I both know that's not really the way it looks. It should be sloped on the inside like it's sloped on the outside. So I'm going to bring it down, but again, I'm going to hold Control, manipulate the blue cube, and scale it so that the interior slopes inward just like the exterior does, right? And then now I can go straight down. Again, I don't want to just pull it. I have to do an additional extrusion. Edit Mesh, Extrude. Anytime I've got a change in shape and change in direction, I got to build that in there. And I don't want to take it all the way to the floor. There's some thickness to the bottom of my jar, my ceramic jar, right? And then, well, you know what, that's pretty flat. What if I use my Insert Edge Loop tool, right? Throw an edge loop in there, right? Use my Move tool, pull it up a little bit. Put some rounding on there. Let's not cut our lip on that jar, right? Let's try to round that out. So that's looking more like the jar. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So again, for the skill check for this assignment, we're using the big three tools. We're not shoving shapes together, we're actually modeling. And then this is what you're going to use. These are the techniques you're going to use when you're trying to model those assets for the week 1 turn-in. But let me give you a little hint on those projects in terms of setting your project. When we were working on the exercise activities, we set our project to the exercise activity. When we were working on the skill checks, we set our project to the skill check. When you are building individual assets, you have to set your project to the individual asset. So if I want to work on an asset, let's say, for example, I want to build the, let me get to the level 1 assets. Let's say I want to build the bottle stopper, right? So what I'm going to have to do is go to File, Set Project, and I'm going to go to my asset file folder, my level 1 assets, and I can't just select level 1 assets and think that that's going to find what I need. That's too far away. Inside of that, I have to select the bottle stopper. and set my project to the bottle stopper. So now when I go to File, Open Scene, yes, bottle asset stoppers. Yeah, that's the one I want, bottle stopper. Let's do it. Click on it. No, I'm not saving this. You should, of course. I'm not. And then now my bottle stopper asset is ready to go. My image is in there. Time for me to model, right? Woo, let's model. Okie dokie. So make sure you're watching those videos. Like Brian was saying, you can watch last month's video. This video will be posted, but there's like a 6-hour delay or something crazy. I don't know. They must like record this stuff on GoToTraining like in Antarctica or something, but for whatever reason, it's 6 hours before we have it. So, but once we get it, we do post it. But if you want to watch last month's lecture, it's probably similar, maybe a little bit more coughing, but for the most part, it's going to be identical. Alrighty. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad that you guys were able to make it here. Like I said, this is how our digital buddies learn every time. So for those of you in my lucky class or in my local class, lucky and local, if you are in my local class, you got a kind of slice of what they're looking at every day. Again, it's a little bit different experience, but I hope you all enjoyed what you learned and learned a lot, and you're ready and anxious to get modeling, and you should get modeling. It's already Saturday, and that stuff is due soon. Does that make sense? So get working, work. You have a lot to do. And yes, go to the Hangout, because that's a great place, literally, to learn and hang out. So make friends and learn and grow on a number of different levels. So take advantage of that. And this application actually takes attendance for us, so we know who's here and who's not. No yard work. I hate that stuff. All right, so good luck, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you learned a lot, had a lot of fun, and you are anxious to get to the modeling. And yes, you guys will stay for lab. Marcus and Sarah will be on, and or Marcus and James will be on, and they will help you out. All righty, so good luck, everybody. Get busy, and I look forward to seeing all you guys back when we're back.